All right, let's talk about 5.3, which is solving by factoring. So the first thing that we need to do is talk about factoring in general. This is something that you talk about a lot in algebra classes. We need to make sure we have a solid foundation before we move forward. So there's one that happens when you have four terms, especially when you have like 4 or 6 or 8 or 10 terms, anything that you can split in half. So starting with 4 and then any even number after that, you can technically do by grouping. Okay, but the most common, definitely what you'll see is 4 terms. So you split it into 2 equal groups, factor out the GCF, which is the greatest common factor, and then factor out the common binomial. So if we look at the first one, when we cut it in half, we're focusing on the first set of parentheses first. X cubed plus 5x squared. The thing that they have in common is an x squared. We're going to factor it out and plus the 5. Then we look at the second pair of parentheses, a negative 2x minus 10. You can take out a negative 2 or factor out a negative 2. And you're left with x plus 5. So as you see, the parentheses end up matching now. So you can quote unquote factor it out or just write it once and then write what is left on the outside. So x squared minus 2 as the other binomial. Same thing's going to happen on number 2. Group them. In the first set of parentheses, you can take out an x squared. And what's left is an x. And then when you take out the entire term, so how we took out the whole x squared, you need to have 1 as a placeholder. If you think about it, you need to be able to do the reverse, aka distribute, and come back where you started. So without that 1, it wouldn't be the same thing anymore. The second set of parentheses, we can take out a negative 4 or factor out a negative 4. And you're left with x plus 1. Sorry, x minus 1. Again, we're going to keep a 1 as a placeholder. In this case, we can then write the x minus 1 once and then x squared minus 4 once. Now we're actually going to be able to take that a step further. This one is the difference of squares, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But if you remember, if you have a binomial or 2 terms, you can split it into 2 separate binomials if it is a difference of squares. So remember, you square root both of them, so you have an x and a 2. And you write it twice. One's a plus, one's a minus. Now remember, when you are doing these, it does not matter what order your binomials are in. Okay, as long as you have all of them there, you're good to go. The 3-term one is always done a bunch of different ways. So I'm going to show you the way that I feel like is most effective, but split middle term is taught throughout GHS. That's going to be the most common one, probably the one that you've seen your whole math career. Okay, guess and check is another common one where you can kind of just guess what it is and then FOIL it to make sure it's right. The T-chart aspect is kind of my thing, and if you don't like it, please feel free to go a different route. I just feel like it's definitely easier in my eyes, and this is how I was taught. Okay, so we're going to find the factors that multiply A times C and add to get B. Okay, then we're going to put A and the variable in the denominator, simplify the fraction, and write bottoms up. So I'm going to show you what that looks like. So we always multiply first times last, or A times C. Right now in this one, A is 1, so 1 times negative 3 is just negative 3. Now I need to multiply to that negative 3 and add to our B value, which is 2. Those two numbers would be 3 and negative 1. At this time, if you know number sense or split middle term, you know that you can just write this as x plus 3x minus 1. Now what I always do is I always put your A value and your variable in the denominator. Okay, and then we always write it bottoms up. So right now it seems like a redundant step, but you'll see why I do this in a second. So yes, x plus 3, x minus 1. This one I'm going to do it with split middle term. Oh no, I'm going to do that on number 6. Okay, so we'll stick with t-charts. So first times last, we have 1 times 4, which is 4. And to multiply to positive 4, add to negative 5 would be negative 4 and negative 1. Now I'm going to put my a value and my variable in the denominator and write it bottoms up. So x minus 4, x minus 1. On number 5, first times last this time gives me negative 24. If I want to multiply to negative 24 and add to 10, I'm going to use 12 and negative 2. This time in my denominator, my a value is 8 and my variable is x. If you have a number in the denominator, you need to simplify fractions if you can. So in this case, 12 and 8 are both divisible by 4. So this becomes 3 and 2. And 2 and 8 are both divisible by 2. So this becomes negative 1 and 4x. Now we do the same thing and write it bottoms up. So 2x plus 3 and 4x minus 1. On our last one, I'm going to do split middle term. So first times last gives me negative 18. I would use 9 and negative 2. If we use split middle term, this is where we would take these and put it in place of the second. So plus 9x minus 2x minus 3. And then we would group it. In the first two, you could take out a 3x. You're left with 2x plus 3. In the next one, just a negative 1. So you're left with 2x plus 3. And we would rewrite it as 2x plus 3 and 3x minus 1. Now you could use the t-chart and you would get the same thing. The last one that we're going to talk about here is difference of squares. So we are going to do x minus 1 and x plus 1. Remember, every time all you do is take the square root of it, and one's a plus, one's a minus. For number 8, square root of 25x squared is 5x. Square root of 16y squared is 4y. And we're going to write it twice. One's a plus, one's a minus. On these next ones, all they're asking in addition to what you've already done is to solve after you factor. So in the first one, we're going to get equals 0 first. That's a huge thing with factoring. And now it's 3 terms, so we're going to use the t-chart. So we have negative 24. We need to multiply to negative 4, add to 2. Negative 24, add to 2, which is 6 and negative 4. In my denominator is our a and our x. And simplify fractions. First one's divisible by 2, so we get 3 over 4x. Next one's divisible by 4, so negative 1 and 2x. And right bottoms up. 4x plus 3, 2x minus 1. At this point, because we're solving, we need to set each one equal to 0. So x would equal negative 3/4 over here, and x would equal 1/2 over here. All right, on the next one, if you notice, there's actually an x cubed, which means that we probably need to factor out something first. If you notice, you can take out a 2 and an x from all 3. When we do that, you're left with x squared plus 2x minus 35. So now if we look at this part, it's a trinomial, so we can t-chart it. If you do first times last, we get negative 35. We need a positive 2, so it's going to be 7 and negative 5. So now we have that 2x out in front, and then we have x plus 7 and x minus 5. And we would set each equal to 0. So the first one would give me x equals 0. The next one would give me -7. And the last one would give me +5. At this point, go ahead and try the next two on your own before you watch this video, okay? Now that you've done these, let's check to see if you did them right. First times last gives me 15. Multiply to 15, add to -8 would be -5 and -3. So that means we'd have x minus 5 and x minus 3 equals 0, which would make x +5 and +3. And then our very last one. The first thing you need to do is make sure that you moved over that 32. Oh, it would be a -32. Now what I'm going to do on this one is take out an 8 because they all are divisible by 8. At this point, the numbers are much simpler to work with. First times last gives me -4. I need a +3, so this would be a +4 and -1. So we have 8, and then x plus 4, x minus 1. With the 8, there's no x attached to it, so you would just get 8 equals 0, which doesn't really mean anything. But the next one would give me a -4. The next one would give me a +1. All right. So solving, there's only one extra step. You just need to set each parts equal to 0 and say what x has to equal.